What's up, everyone? Thanks for joining me as always. So in today's video, we're talking all about using film simulations with RAW files and also shooting high ISOs and also shooting wide-angle lenses for portraits in the studio. So let's get right into it. All right, so my name's Pete. I am a portrait photographer based in New York. And if you like this video, please do me a huge favor and subscribe. Hit that like button, leave me a comment. It really goes far to help me grow the channel and do more content for those of you who are enjoying it. So I wanted to talk to you about a session I had yesterday with a model named Nelson. And Nelson came to the studio to update his portfolio. And I intended on using the 23mm f1.2 because those of you following my videos know that I've been talking about it quite a bit because I just picked it up and I really want to use it on location for a gig or for backgrounds kind of stuff at a club. But I haven't had the chance to do that yet. And so I decided, all right, I'll use it for a few images at my studio when I do this session. However, I plan on using the Canon R5 and the 50mm lens as my main rig for this session. But the problem was, which happens way too much, honestly, is that the Canon R5 would just not tether to my Capture One on my computer. So I shoot tethered, meaning I have the camera plugged into the computer so I could see the images popping up on my screen. And for whatever reason, Capture One and Canon cameras they hate each other. They really do. And so I find the tethering is very inconsistent. So I tethered it. It worked a little bit, but then I was also using the Canon for some video BTS. Long story short, it just wouldn't tether. And so I just unplugged it and I was like, forget this, I'm going to use the Fuji. Because say what you want about Fuji cameras, but if you plug a Fuji camera in to Capture One, it just works perfectly. So I plugged my Fuji X-T5 in and I had the 35 equivalent lens on it, which is the Fujinon 23mm 1.4. And I just decided, let me just use this. And you know what? In hindsight, I'm glad I did because a couple of things that I'm going to talk about in this video. The first thing is that I've never really used a 35mm equivalent, like a full frame equivalent lens for portraits. And that's what the 23 more or less is. And so I found it limiting at first because I usually like to get really close and do like close-ups and stuff like that. You can't really do that with a 35. It's a little harder. You got to be more selective. So I wound up shooting everything a lot wider than I normally do. And honestly, I love the results. So it was different than a lot of the stuff that I've done previously. And this is why, in general terms, I love shooting with prime lenses because a prime lens forces you to just deal with whatever the focal length is. Whereas if you're using a zoom lens, you could just zoom in and out. And it seems like you have more ability to be creative with a zoom lens, right? But the truth is that limiting yourself to a fixed lens forces you to become more creative with it. So what I wound up doing was just shooting more wide than I usually do. Now, luckily, the model that I was photographing turned out to be not only really, really great in experience, but he brought a ton of cool clothing. So we had a lot of good clothing options, which featured heavily in the photos. So the 35mm equivalent, again, I'm talking about the 23mm f1.4 Fujinon lens, really did an amazing job for this particular shoot, and it got me to be a little bit more creative. So going forward, I see myself now using that as part of what I use in my sessions when I use the Fuji in my studio for studio portrait sessions. So it's already found a place in my home there. And like I said, I'm going to do it on location. We'll talk about that at some point. But that was really cool and interesting. Aside from that, two things. One, I used film simulations with RAW files. Now, I've talked about this in videos past, but I figure those of you who are new to the channel will probably enjoy hearing about what I do here. So if you don't know, if you're shooting in Capture One, and I have no idea if this works in Lightroom, but I would probably assume it's the same thing. If you shoot in RAW, you can still turn your film simulation on the back of your camera, right? Just like normal. And you can take the film simulation and apply it, and so it pops up on the screen. So as I'm photographing my models, like one of the things I love is acros with a G filter. So I'm shooting in acros, and they're popping up on my screen in black and white. So you see what they're going to look like. But when you go to edit it, there's a drop-down menu in Capture One where you can change it to any other film simulation or just put it on standard. So I really like that because I was able to experiment a little bit. And in this shoot, I was shooting with my friend Paul Marty, who's an amazing photographer. I'll put his info in the description as well. And we were trying out some different lights. And one of the things we did was a hard, small beauty dish, just kind of direct, hitting the subject with a plain white seamless paper. Now, you guys, if you've seen a lot of my portrait work, you know I like this, what's right behind me. I like textured backdrops. I like the shadows and the fall off, and I like lights hitting it. So that's generally what I'm going to do. But I found that hitting him with that light with the plain white backdrop, at first, it kind of threw me off a little bit. It looked too plain to me. So what I decided was, let me try some of these film simulations, and that's what I did. So the long and the short of it is, I was shooting a lot of portraits, and what I'll usually do is like a lot of color grading. And so what I'm trying to do now is get the color grade in camera as much as possible. Like what I'm doing here for the lighting I'm using for my video that you're watching right now. This is a 2-light setup because it's for video. It's a little different. But when I do this for portraits, it's a 3-light setup with a beauty dish as key, a large umbrella as fill, and a background light. And we call it the hero light. And by the way, I have a coaching group for photographers if you want to learn how to take great portraits. I'll link that in the description below. Check it out. What I've been doing is trying to get the color grade in camera, right? However, sometimes I'll use LUTs. Sometimes I'll manually grade the image in post. But the beauty of the film simulations, and all of us who shoot Fuji know this is one of the main reasons we love Fuji cameras, is that you have these beautiful film simulations. So I just was either taking them in the film simulation in camera, or in post, I kind of just was like scrolling through and finding one that I liked and then tweaking it from there. And I have to say, I think you should all, if you're shooting with a Fuji camera and you're shooting RAW, you should definitely give this a try because it is the best of both worlds. You have your film sims and you have your ability to disable them if you need to just do something with the raw file and the flat neutral profile. It was really cool. Now, the third thing I want to talk to you about is why I was using ISOs of 800 and 1000 when I'm in the studio. And this is the most frustrating part, not frustrating, but the challenging part is a better way to say it. When it comes to using the Fuji X series, the smaller sensor, and also like a 1.4 lens. Because generally when I do this particular kind of thing I'm going to tell you about right now, I'm using a 1.2 lens on an R5 Canon full frame camera. So I generally have plenty of light. And the Canon, if you up the ISO, of course it's full frame. It's going to handle it better than the Fuji. So why did I use a high ISO in the first place? Well, to get the kind of light that I want, the look that I want, when I'm shooting with continuous lights, we're not talking flash right now, we're talking continuous lights. I need the lights powered very, very low. So in fact, the key light is powered generally, if I'm using a NAN light, which is what I like to use in a beauty dish or a small modifier, it's at 1% or 2%. And then the fill light is at 1 or 2% if I have a fill light. So it forces me to use even wide open, shooting at 1.4 on the 23 millimeter. I still have to use an ISO of like 800 or 1000. And so that's why I did that. Now, why don't I just raise the power of the light is what you'll ask, right? And the reason why I don't raise the power of the light is because it changes the quality and the look that you get. And even if you stop down with the light raised to a higher power, it just gives you a different look. And that's what I've noticed in my shooting. Now, maybe it's all in my head and I'm a little crazy. Maybe I am, but that's why I do that. And so I don't mind higher ISO in that case because I want that lower power. The thing is, like once you hit 1000 ISO on the X-T5, you could see a little bit of grain in there, but like nothing that's not acceptable and that's not kind of like fine. 800 is super good. 1000 in the studio, if you pixel peep, you can see it like a little bit of grain there. But I don't care because no one's pixel peeping, and even if I printed them at large sizes, it's gonna look awesome. Photographers will like complain about noise and higher ISOs and then add grain to their photos in post. So I think like the whole grain thing is already overrated. And I found myself doing that with a couple of the photos. I added a little bit of grain because I thought I added to the effect. However, I don't usually do that. And with the ones with the higher ISO, I did not add grain to it because I had a little bit, like you could see there's a little bit, even without pixel peeping, a little bit of grittiness to them, which I think added to the portrait. So there you have it. That's what's been going on in my life and in my studio. And outside of all of that, here's wishing you all an amazing, wonderful day. Go out and take some great pictures. Enjoy your camera, whichever one you have, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.